Good afternoon to all of our viewers and listeners of the NDC Heartbeat program. It's another beautiful afternoon in Grenada, and we'll be having quite a program lined up for you today. As a matter of fact, this weekend, the National Democratic Congress is recognizing and celebrating its 35th year as a political party in Grenada. So we will be chatting later on, maybe at about 12:30ish, with former leaders of the party, and of course, including the present political leader. But to start the program off today, we'll be chatting with the Mr. David Gumbs of the RMI, which is known as the Rocky Mountain Institute based out in Colorado. Now, the RMI is a non-profit organization which dedicates its efforts to assisting governments and power companies in achieving the transition from fossil fuels to using renewables or clean energy. Very shortly, we'll be chatting with Mr. David Gumbs on renewables in the Caribbean, as assisted by the RMI. Now, he's the director responsible for the Caribbean, and he'll be coming on the set very shortly. But before we do this, we'll give you just a quick review of last week's episode. Stay with us. We'll be back with you in a moment.
Previously on The Heartbeat.
Just want to appeal to members of the public to recognize our elders for what they would have contributed. Mm-hmm. Be respectful to them on the street. Lend a helping hand whenever you can. Be of some assistance to them. Always try to give them the go-ahead when it comes to lining up in a queue or getting something in the marketplace. Just offer them that respect and that courtesy to go before you and to just be there for them and to be good to them, because they would have given a lot of years of service to this country, and we have to recognize that, or we should recognize that.
Welcome back to the NDC Heartbeat program, and as promised, we have with us Mr. David Gumbs. He is going to be telling us all about the efforts of RMI, which is the Rocky Mountain Institute, and how they're collaborating with Caribbean countries in achieving renewable, clean energy prospects. So welcome to Heartbeat, Mr. Gumbs, and maybe I should ask you to take this opportunity to kindly introduce yourself and let our listeners and viewers know who you are and what really is the vision of RMI. Welcome to Heartbeat.
Thank you so much, Terry. Good afternoon to all your listeners, and pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. My name is David Gumbs, and as Terry mentioned, I am the one of the directors of the RMI Islands program. And my background, briefly, I am a trained financial technical individual, spent many years functioning as financial director of many organizations in the US for many years. And I am originally from Anguilla, down in the Caribbean. So I, after spending a pretty long time in the US, I wanted to go back home and make a contribution there. And I ended up becoming the CFO of the Anguilla Electricity Company. That led into the role of CEO of the Anguilla Electricity Company. And after 12 years, I decided to make the move back to the US, and I now reside in the US as of the last couple of years. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to work for the Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI. And it naturally, given sort of my technical background and then some of my long experience in the utility business, ended up being a very good match in terms of the work I did into transitioning into the work that I do today, which is transitioning primarily utilities. Those are the ones who operate and control the space, utilities in the region, to renewable energy and helping them along that pathway. In the process of doing that, we work and partner with governments, private sector, and utilities primarily. And we've worked with, at this point, about 20 different countries to help them along their transition pathway. And in doing so, we've had a number of successful projects, from utility scale projects to microgrid projects, battery storage projects, and a whole number of projects, including actually mobility projects, meaning transition to electric vehicles. So we've done quite a bit of work, and we have a process for doing that. And I'll be happy to share a lot more about what we do and how we can help in this space.
The Caribbean Electricity Utility Services Corporation, CARELEC, in association with the RMI Rocky Mountain Institute, has partnered with about 12 or so Caribbean countries to advance renewable energy and climate resilience initiatives. How is that progressing in the region, and is Grenada a part of this?
Yeah, so there are a number of organizations that we partner with in the region. We partner with CCRE, we partner with CARELEC, we partner with AOSIS, and a number of organizations, CDB, Caribbean Development Bank. So in terms of CARELEC and its partnerships, CARELEC has a membership of over 30 utility and energy providers in the region. They're one of our key partners. So Grenada is part of the CARELEC brotherhood, sisterhood. And when I was at Anguilla Electricity was also part of that organization. So it's like a great organization for sort of working with each other. And I can talk some very specific ways because particularly GrenLic had brought in when we got hit with Hurricane Irma in Anguilla. GrenLic was one of our hero utility, and Grenada one of our hero countries because it really was a lifesaver at that point in time in terms of the aid and support that was brought in. But RMI in particular, we've worked with about 20 different countries in various capacities, and Grenada is not one of those countries as yet. I hope that changes soon.
Really? I mean, how long has this partnership been, basically, with Grenada?
Yeah, so there's the partnership with CARELEC, which has been going on for easily 30 years, right?
Right.
From the RMI perspective, we've worked with CARELEC from our inception, from day one. That's going on about 10 years. Particularly for us, we've been working in the region, as I mentioned, about 10 years. We started off with a 10-island challenge, which was Aruba, Anguilla, BVI, a whole number of entities that started out in the region. That work was done through another arm that is now part of RMI called the Carbon War Room. So you'll see a lot of literature out there on that 10-island challenge. And RMI sort of merged with Carbon War Room about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and has sort of broadened the program and broadened the outreach and the types of things we do. So we've been in the region quite a while. And we really look forward to working with Grenada going forward.
Well, the thing is, RMI is a non-profit organization dedicated to providing technical assistance to governments and power companies. I am a little bit baffled as to why Grenada has not been part of this initiative over the many, many years that this organization existed. Can you therefore share with us maybe what had been the reasoning for it?
Yeah, so our approach is pretty straightforward. There are two ways we get involved with countries. One is direct outreach to us, and if countries reach out to us in ways that we can support their transition process. And then we also look at strategic initiatives for us to champion. So almost every country we work with, we come up with a very strategic objective in doing so. And most times that's about proving the renewable energy pathway. So if you can imagine in the early days, there was a lot of hesitation about whether solar and renewables could really work and whether it was cost saving and could technically integrate with the grid. Well, we worked on projects early on to prove that, yes, it could work. And then, each stage where we're working, I'll give you a good example. Bermuda, our theory of change in Bermuda is about proving that we could lower costs through aggregating renewable energy projects. So rather than doing a small project at each building or each site, we could do 30 sites and develop a large-scale project and reduce costs. So that's a good example of how we work. Now, we have worked a little bit with Grenada in the past. That work didn't lead to any major initiatives. And much of that had to do with the relationship with the utility, privately owned, and some of the challenges that were going on over the last probably 5 to 10 years. So I think we're a nonprofit, so we're very particular about how we use our resources. There's a limited amount of resources because we get the generosity of wealthy donors who say we believe in a cause and we want to contribute to the transition and improvement or reduction of impact on climate, right? So climate change. And we have to be very cautious about how we do that. So we're very strategic about who we work with and when we work with them so that we can get the greatest impact.
Mm-hmm. I am reading through this to mean if you do not wish to work with us, I would not waste donors' money on you. Am I right or am I wrong?
I wouldn't put it that way, but sometimes it could be interpreted that way, but I wouldn't put it that way. We're very open and very, flexible type of organization. But we have to have, a private sector company would look for returns on investment. We look for returns on investment in another way, and that is how much impact we're making. So we'll try, but if there isn't a clear pathway to getting a project done, then we will pull back and find other ways to do it. But definitely we have to be cautious. So we're just cautious and we're prudent. Well, I put it that way.
You're very diplomatic, Mr. Gums. I thank you for your diplomacy in the matter. The local Grenadian people will interpret this differently, but nonetheless, share with us what are some of the advantages and disadvantages to achieve green energy or clean energy transition, and how does this relate to your RMI Institute, which I would repeat is non-profit?
Yeah. So the work we do on the ground, I put, we've transformed over the years. And what has happened over time is that, like I talked about, early on, it was about proving that renewable energy can work at low cost and so forth. Now, a lot of things change in a short period of time, say in the last 5 years in particular, right? But over the last 10 years, renewable energy costs has gone down 80%, particularly in solar PV. Cost has gone down 80%. Battery storage costs has gone down significantly, 60, 70%. So what has happened, where you had to prove that it's cost effective before, now it's no question about its cost effectiveness. Where you had to talk about technological integration before, it's not about that anymore because the technology has come such a long way and there's so many technological solutions. So now the discussion is about how we do it and how quickly we do it. So we work from A to Z along that pathway. In the initial steps, we're working with countries to do something called an integrated resource plan, which is essentially saying, here are the potential pathways. We look at all the renewable energy technologies from wind, solar, geothermal, ocean, and so forth. But we know there are only a few viable ones, particularly in the Caribbean region. So we come to the most effective or cost-effective pathways in many cases. And we look at sort of no regrets approach to doing this. What projects can we do that 3 years or 5 years from now, we're going to say that's the project that had to be done, and it leads to quite a number of benefits, particularly savings around electricity costs, right? So I'll give you a good example. We used to work on a lot of integrated resource plans, but since it's clear what the pathways are, and most times they come up with a lot of the same outcomes. There are very few countries that have in the region that have different viable renewable energy pathways, right? So Grenada can talk about geothermal. There's some potential there, solar and wind. And if you have some level of hydro, yes, but that's probably very minimal. And then you have ocean. Well, the ones that are really viable are going to be geothermal, solar, and wind. And you look at those and say, okay, what are the benefits and disadvantages and advantages that each of these technologies bring? And then we do everything along the way to make that happen. We support the utility or the government in every way to make that happen. And now what the things that we're working on are things that are considered like revolutionary, industry leading, smart grid types of technologies, right? So now we're talking about microgrids and the benefits that microgrids bring to the energy system, including things like resilience, right? So rather than having one centralized plant, you now can have hundreds of plants producing energy all across Grenada. And that reduces costs, but also increases resiliency, because if a storm passes through and hits one side of Grenada, the other side can still produce electricity and receive electricity because all the energy production is localized at this point. So those are the big things that we're working on. But we still work on project management for any project, wind, solar. And we have done some geothermal work in terms of planning and assessments, but we're not geothermal experts.
Okay. Well, let me just get something very clear, because already I'm seeing certain questions flashing. Your service would cost the government of Grenada, or had cost the government of Grenada, previous one, absolutely nothing for your technical services. Is that true, or is it false?
That's typically true about 90% of the time. The way we operate and where we're funded, because there's a cost to doing this work. Much of it is cost to cover the technical persons, myself and others who do this kind of work. But also there's cost that has to happen on the ground, like geotechnical studies and land surveys and different things like that. And a lot of the project related costs that has to happen. So some of that cost, there is cost. So what we do in first instance is we try to fund it through philanthropic sources, right? So there are certain times like things are aligned at the front end, right? Where there's interest in seeing a particular country progress because the opportunity is right. And there is a particular donor that is aligned and says, I want to make sure we advance that particular country. And yes, in those cases, there's no cost to the country itself. But there are other times where we're not aligned up front, where we have to, if we're engaged, we have to cover the costs in some sense. So we do also do fee for service, but we do that at a very reduced rate from like a typical commercial rate because we're a nonprofit. And our objective is to see a change in the pathway that we're on, the trajectory we're on towards climate change, and the impact that will have on the region. But also, there's another factor that weighs heavily when we're talking in the Caribbean context, and that's the cost of energy. And it really is something that is painful for the economies and the people of the region.
All right. So the pathways which Grenada has available for its upliftment, as you indicated, are solar, geothermal, wave, and wind energies. With your organization being nonprofit and the minimal costs that may ensue as a result of your intervention or acceptance by the government of Grenada or any other government, which of these pathways would you recommend if the government so considers your nonprofit assistance and its technical work? Which one of the first pathways would you recommend Grenada going in order to reduce electricity costs and create clean and renewable energy in Grenada?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, we've done a number of integrated resource plans, and certainly we study others and we watch the trends in the region. So, and we've been working with 20 different countries, so we understand the dynamics of the region, the politics of the region, all the sensitivities that come with the energy transition. And I worked in a utility in the region, right? So, so there's an easy way to answer that, and that is the easiest pathway right now, and the one that we would recommend immediately without a whole lot of fanfare and studies and analyses, is to transition some portion of the electricity generation to solar PV. All right. And there's a number of reasons that we would recommend that as the number one pathway right now for any country in the region. 2, it's immediate, it's scalable, all right, it's proven, and combined with battery storage, it's super cost effective. So we're talking about, in Grenada's case, and right now we're just talking about the price that the average consumer pays, okay? If the average consumer is paying about 48 cents per kilowatt hour today, all right, so for every unit of energy, the average consumer is paying about 48 cents. That's US cents, by the way, not EC.
Yeah.
Solar PV, the cost of just the solar PV portion itself, the energy generation, is closer to 10 cents. And that can vary depending on, the location of the project, but it's not going to vary tremendously. Now, that's just the energy generation portion of the tariff that you pay at 48 cents. You layer back on, the transmission and distribution costs, and then the cost of the administrative work, the billing, and other services that the utility provides. But we're still talking about at roughly half the price of electricity today, right? Now, what that means is that at that heavily discounted rate for energy, you can have a payback that's roughly, in some countries, it's 2 years. So in some countries, the electricity rate is about 60 cents, okay?
Wow.
So at 60 cents, you're talking about a 2-year payback. In this case, we're talking about a 4-year payback.
Wow.
Right? So that means you make the investment today, it will pay for itself in 4 years. And after that, you're essentially really, really super discounted electricity costs, right? But beyond that, what we're talking about is all the other technologies have a pathway to commissioning that is easily 4 years and more than likely more than 4 years. So if we look at geothermal, that's not as certain a pathway, right? You have to prove the resource. It has to be a viable resource. It has to be at the scale necessary to drive down price. And so getting through that pathway can take about 10 years in some instances, right? Wind, you have to prove the resource. The wind has to be there, but not only there as a country, there in that specific location that you're going to put the wind plant. So there's so many things that have to happen. Whereas solar is proven, it's easy technologically, it integrates well. There are a lot of considerations, and that's why there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. But the timelines are much shorter.
So what would you say is the timeline associated with introducing solar as a means of renewable clean energy?
Yeah, good question. That timeline can be as short as like 9 months. Decisions. It's all about decision making. That's usually the thing that ties up solar for multiple years, right? Decision making. You have to have the land, okay? You have to have the studies done, but they're minimal because solar, in terms of irradiation from the sun, is pretty much standard throughout the region, and we're in a favorable irradiation zone, right? So for the most part, not much has to be done there. If it's close to an airport, you have to do some, studies about glare and the impact on planes landing and so forth. But even that, there's technology that overcomes that, and that's come a long way. So that's not even as technically challenging anymore. What we're talking about is just working through a procurement process.
Right.
You want to give the procurement process enough time to be floated throughout globally. You want to give enough time to consider the evaluation process and decision making. And then you give about 6 months for, and that's on the high side, 6 months for the construction and commissioning. So it can be a year, it could be 9 months, or it could be a year. It all depends on how much or any of that legwork has been done and how much work has to be done. Because some countries, for example, Bermuda does not have the land space to do a utility scale, or many utility scale. It has some space to do some. But there's a lot of competition because they're about 20 square miles. So, and they have a lot of concentration of buildings and corporations and that kind of stuff. So it all depends on the country. But in Grenada's context, I think it can be done rather quickly. It's just about decision making.
Great. Well, we're going to go on a short break, but before we do, I'd like you to give consideration to this question. Why would a government invest millions of dollars, close to 200 million, in buying a fossil-generated company to produce electricity? Back with you in a moment. We take a short break.
39 years after the unfortunate demise of Grenada Revolution, a white flag was hoisted at Fort George and a wreath laid by government officials, signaling what is to be the beginning of the healing process. On Wednesday at the crack of dawn, Acting Prime Minister Honorable Dennis Cornwall, along with Honorable Red-Headed, participated in a flag-raising and wreath-laying ceremony at Fort George. The date October 19, 1983 is one that Grenadians must never forget, and it should be used as a time to reflect upon as the demise of the People's Revolutionary Government, led by fallen Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, ended in a division of our people. Honorable Reddit says the scars left by the pain and suffering of the events of 1983 needs to be healed. As a result of this, his government will use the opportunity to propose a series of actions geared towards promoting national healing.
Next year, Grenada will remember and recognize all days of the tragic ending, from the 19th to the 25th, a week long of activities. October 19th will be declared a holiday, and a special consideration will be given to developing our National Heroes Framework to designate a day entitled Maurice Bishop Day, among others. The government will make an official request to our friends in the US and UK to provide factual information surrounding the bodies of the fallen. No government, no people, or system is so evil that it cannot give a respectable burial, even in ceremony, to our fallen Grenadian men and women leaders.
There are plans to construct a monument of peace early in 2023 that will bear the names of all those who have died as a result of the tragic events of October 19, 1983.
In recognition of the tragedy of 83, in keeping with the guidelines of monuments, it will incorporate the names of all Grenadians who lost their lives on the 19th. This monument, we believe, can be a symbol for peace and healing. And finally, teaching the stories about the Grenada Revolution will be encouraged through civic education in the first instance. A country unaware of its past is undoubtedly doomed to repeat it.
He says while the government is in its young days, they suggest engaging in mature conversations in treating with the pain and sadness associated with the ending of the revolution.
This administration will not encourage the nation to continue to carry burdens of the past. The division, anger, and hatred towards each other will never help to heal, nor are they conducive to development. Let us make a collective decision to recover, and in the true spirit of the rebel, notwithstanding the actions of the past, say forward ever, backward never.
Honorable Redhead says the nation must forgive but not forget and accept the reality that as human beings we are all prone to errors, being mindful that an error does not become a mistake until we fail to correct it.
Welcome back to the NDC Heartbeat program. We're chatting with Mr. Gums, who is a director representative of RMI. Mr. Gums, before you share with us your response on the question just before we go on the break, let me just also indicate to you that, and you can incorporate your response thereon, Grenada's Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell had chosen to focus on his recent address at the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which was held recently in New York. he focused on the topic of climate change and the negative effects on small island states like Grenada. Now, with the upcoming COP27 global meeting, do you think that the ambitions of coordinating global solutions on clean power, electrifying transportation, decarbonizing industries, and ensuring a just and equitable transition across the globe is possible?
Yeah,
I would love to get your response on that.
Yeah, definitely it's possible. I think I'm not the only one who's been disappointed in the past about the outcomes of many of the COP meetings. This is going to be COP 27. We have a lot of hope that things will change and the commitments that were made will actually happen and material progress will be made. There's a lot of frustration around the commitments and that aren't really solidified, in the year after COP. So every year you go back and you make the same commitments. And I say commitments, this is what the developed countries are, who are contributing most to climate change and who are driving the impact on our region with more hurricanes, stronger hurricanes, temperature changes, droughts, So the impact is so varied. The coral reefs, fishing, sargassum seaweed. I mean, there's so many impacts on our region. They need to do more and they need to do it faster. So that's the frustrating part. But nonetheless, there are positive things that happen each year. It's just it's not at the rate we need to make it happen. So I'm looking forward to going there to speak up, have an additional voice in the room, and making sure we speak up for small island developing states, particularly the Caribbean countries that are so severely impacted. Quick step. Some of these hurricanes, including when they hit Anguilla, Dominica in particular. Dominica was devastated by Maria, Puerto Rico by Irma and Maria. But you're talking about, they're getting hit at a rate that's double the impact, double the size, the amount of GDP for that particular country. So in Dominica's case, it was 2.5 times the GDP. It takes an eternity to recover that loss.
Absolutely.
That happens.
Well, let me just mention to you that I believe that our young Minister for Energy, the Honorable Karine James, will be most likely attending the November COP meeting. And as a young individual, the effects of climate change will no doubt affect her generations to come. And therefore, I trust that there will be some real tangible results coming from that COP meeting, because the Paris Accord in 2015 was just a bunch of nice, lofty talk and no action. And I think the Caribbean in particular and small island states are demanding that real action takes place at these meetings and real results emerge. But coming back to the first question before we went on the break, and we just have a few minutes left, would the RMI recommend at this point in time that a purchase of a diesel fossil fuel burning entity be purchased to produce electricity in an island like Grenada? Yeah,
and we can't say wholeheartedly no to that. As passionate as we are about climate change and the impact and the transition that we need to make from fossil fuel to renewables, we can't say wholeheartedly no. And there's a real easy reason. Utilities operate on a cycle, the life cycle of investments. Dependent on the timing of that life cycle, you may be in a situation where you don't have a choice. And, so consideration has to be given for that. And that's why we do this through a planned pathway. Now, we want that pathway to be aggressive as much as possible because, one, it immediately reduces costs. And I talk about some of the cost considerations, and nobody should be paying an extreme amount for electricity, which is a basic necessity nowadays. So that's the immediate one. The climate impact is small from the region, but it matters. So we want to make a statement from the region that we are making the transition so that we can get those people at COP to say, hey, you know what? The Caribbean is embarrassing you. Look at the progress that Grenada has made. you need to do more. You need to contribute more towards this change because there's no excuse anymore. So, but to simple answer to your question, we should defer that as much as possible. We should do that in increments that are only necessary to intervene. If there's a current crisis, you have to create baseload generation. You have to do it at a scale that's necessary, but that meet the more immediate needs. What you don't want to do as a country in terms of, this is for any Caribbean country, is lock yourself into a 30-year fossil fuel profile where you now have to do twice the amount of investment for renewable energy transition because you're committed to certain climate commitments, and the world is changing in that regard, versus locking yourself in for the next 30 years because these assets are 30-year investments. So you want to do it at a scale that is appropriate, and that's the type of analysis and work we do. But we understand that certain decisions have to be taken.
Well, again, you're most diplomatic, Mr. Gums. I want to thank you very much for being on the program today and to give you 10 seconds just for your final thoughts.
Yeah, Terry, the work we do is very, very important. It's important to all of us because we know the impact climate change is making on us, today, not tomorrow, not in 10 years, today. So this is something that we have to commit to. But the easy sell for someone like me in this industry is that it has an immediate return on investment. It lowers our costs tremendously. So it's something that benefits all of us in some way immediately. So even if we're not passionate about climate, we're always passionate about the impact on our wallets. So I encourage and we welcome any discussion in any shape or form around renewable energy. So I hope to have another opportunity to come back and talk more. Yeah. And maybe we'll be talking more about the success and the progress we're making with Grenada in the transition.
Well, thank you so very much. I mean, we could have gone on and on for the rest of the afternoon, but another time we'll pick up on it. Thank you.
Vehicles.
Yeah, thank you so very much indeed. This was Mr. David Gums, who is a director, one of the leaders of RMI, which is Rocky Mountain Institute. It's a nonprofit organization providing guidance and support to governments and power companies in the region. Thank you very much. We'll be back in a moment. Okay. We will be joining very shortly former political leaders of the National Democratic Congress very shortly as they reflect on their term of office as political leader. Back with you in just a moment. Welcome back to the NDC Heartbeat program this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And the National Democratic Congress Party is celebrating its 35th anniversary, 35 years existing as a political party and going strong. And on the line, several of the former political leaders who had served the party, and they will be just reflecting on their term in office, their successes, their challenges, and their thoughts for the way forward. So I believe we have on the line Mr. Joseph Andel. Good afternoon to you, Minister Andel.
Hi, Terry. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all listeners and viewers.
Great.
It's a pleasure being on the Heartbeat. It's been a little while between drinks for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you had served the National Democratic Congress as one of its political leaders. Do you recall the period and what was it like, your successes, your challenges, your hopes and aspirations? What was that experience like?
Well, my stint came about a couple of months after the second of back-to-back 15-0 clean sweeps at the poll. Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty turbulent time in the history of the organization. It was a time that called for equanimity in terms of the way one dealt with the leadership of the party, the managing of the affairs of the party. And it was a really good learning experience for me. One thing I could say is that I had quite a lot of support. And whenever you start calling names, you run the risk of forgetting some people who made key contributions, but I'll take that risk. I must single out the former party leaders, Uncle Tilly, Brother Nazim Burke, who were always there, who always had my back. They never got in the way, but I knew that I could count on them whenever I needed to. Then our indefatigable soldier, Brother Glenn Noel. Glenn has been an unappreciated rock in the NDC for several years, and he was one of those who really contributed to holding things together in that period. We had people like Adrian Pasuda Thomas, Sister Claudette Joseph, Sister Joan Purcell as an elder, Mr. Kent Joseph, who was always there to support in more ways than one, Sister Merle Bayer, and a host of others. So it was a challenging time in the sense that we were faced with a number of people, executive members, stepping aside for one reason or another. And it was important that some of the stalwarts stay behind to hold things together. Many times people don't appreciate the behind the scenes work that goes into keeping a political organization on track. Mm-hmm. And we had quite a number of people who were playing that role in that period from the middle of 2018 up until Sister Franca Bernardin was elected as leader. Mm-hmm. In that period of time, we had a number of our younger members beginning to make their mark. We had people like now Minister Ron Redhead, Tevin from Carriacou, Sister Kerrine James, who is also now making big footprints. That was the period in which she started to rise and shine. So the NDC has been through a lot, but I was always confident that we would ride out the turbulent waters, because at the core of the party, the values that hold us together are things that we believe in. And I know that the majority of us at the leadership level, we see it as service and not as power. So once you're going from that perspective, you could only go from strength to strength. I was never discouraged, Terry.
Great.
Because
Wonderful.
As I said, there was a team of people always around to provide help, to carry you sometimes when you needed a little bit of support. And that is one of the hallmarks of the NDC, that even though we went through the bottom of the trough, we always had enough soldiers to keep the battle going.
Great.
And while it is still an ongoing process, I believe that the position that we are in now is vindication of all the struggles, all the hard work, all the sacrifice and commitment. So
wonderful.
The future looks bright for us. We have a new team, a new leader who is energetic, who is a strategic thinker, who above all else is a team player.
Wonderful.
Party leader and Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell understands what it means to be a leader, to inspire, to encourage, and to support. And so I feel very confident as NDC embarks on the journey into middle age.
Great.
Thank you.
Wonderful indeed. Thank you so very much indeed. I appreciate the fact that teamwork works. That's the salient point. Teamwork works. Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Handel, now Minister for Foreign Affairs. Thank you for your reflection on your term in office of the NDC as its political leader. I believe we have next online is Brother Nazim Burke, is it? Or who do we have online? We have Brother Persuader Thomas, Adrian Persuader Thomas. Good afternoon, Mr. Thomas.
Good afternoon, Terry, and thanks for having me on the Heartbeat program today. It's always a pleasure to be on your program in your mix.
Great, wonderful indeed. Well, The same question goes out to you. You served the party for some time during some turbulent periods, and what was the experience like? What were your highlights, your joyous moments, your challenges, etc. And now that you're Minister for Agriculture, let us know something about how it was for you during that period serving as political leader of the party as we celebrate 35 years of the NDC being a political party in Grenada.
Right. So first of all, I would like to say good afternoon to all your listeners throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and my brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Good afternoon, everybody. Terry, first of all, I would like to acknowledge this noble institution, the National Democratic Congress. It's a party that I'm very, very proud to be part of. Secondly, I want to endorse the contribution by Brother Andal. I think he gave a succinct analysis of the situation there when he was leader of the party. Terry, one of the things that I enjoy in the National Democratic Congress, and I had to take over from Sister Franca Bernardine in 2021, late 2020, 2021, when she resigned from the party because of health reasons. And I must say that it was not an easy period to go through. But as Brother Andal said, I could have only make it with having good people around me. And I have to endorse all the names that Brother Andal echoed there. And I will also insert a very good friend of mine. I don't know if she's going to mind me calling her name on this program, but at this point in time, but Sister Jenny Simon, she played a very significant role in regards to her contribution to the party, both in kind and in time and in property and so on, from that period, 2013, coming all the way to 2018. And as everybody knows in Grenada, this is a period that the National Democratic Congress had it very difficult. But Terry, one of what I have observed in this party is that the 40% of the electorate who supports the National Democratic Congress, these people never went away. They, in thick and thin, they were there with the party. They hold tight. And I must say, within all these difficult periods, the party never lose sight of that high level of integrity, that high level of honesty and humility within the party, the transparency and accountability and good governance that we always talk about. Some people try to trivialize that, but we are seeing the importance of those principles today in running Grenada. And this is the reason why, because we are bent on these principles, we are able to tell the public at this point in time that is not $2.2 billion that are going to get us answer the question of pension in Grenada. Neither is it $432 million. It is $60 million. And that is what we talk about: transparency, accountability, good governance, honesty with the people. And I think the party was able to hold on to this principle. We could have done other things and speak other language, which would have maybe put us in a better position. But we believe that this is the foundation of the party. And if it takes 20 years, 30 years for the Grenadian people to understand that, I think the National Democratic Congress held on to that, to those principles. And here we are today. I want to touch on a little how much the disunity in the party set us back. And in 2013, we experienced some difficulties in the party. And this did not only hold back the party, but it held back the people of Grenada, because a lot of things that took place for the past 10 years, Terry, those things could have been fixed because we had all plans in place to make sure that the progress that we started in 2008, we had all plans to execute those things. But the fact that we could not continue in office after 2013, it was a terrible mistake that the party made. And I want to say and put on record here that the party have recognized its mistake. We have recognized the errors that we have made, and we are now putting structure in place to make sure that those things never happen again. Today, we have a government that is very united. When I go to cabinet, Terry, I feel the camaraderie. When I meet fellow ministers in the street, I feel the camaraderie. We laugh, we joke, we hope we have something going good, because we know that the Grenadian people are depending
I think we have a short internet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, we had a short break in the internet, but may I just ask, seeing that we have others to come, if you can wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
Sure.
Thank
Well,
you.
I just want to make the final point that Grenadians have a golden opportunity now, Terry, to move this country forward. And the emphasis that we are putting on education, agriculture, and health, I think it's very important that we continue that progress and we show leadership in going forward. There's a sigh of relief and uneasiness and easiness in this country at this point in time. People no longer living in fear, and I hope that we'll continue that for the next 20 years as we move forward.
Well, thank you so very much, Senator, the Honorable Adrian Persuader Thomas, now Minister for Agriculture. Thank you so very much for your presentation. And I believe we now have on the line Mr. Nazim Burke. Mr. Nazim Burke, good afternoon. And I know you are from far away, so we thank you for joining us. And we would say there are 2 minutes for your presentation. We have others lined up. The NDC party is celebrating its 35th year as a political party in Grenada. And we just wanted you to reflect on your period in office, the highlights, the challenging moments, etc., and share with the viewing and listening audience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Terry. Let me say good afternoon to everybody who's listening in and to my colleagues who have just spoken. Having listened to Brother Andal and Brother Persuader, I think they have captured the essence of our journey over the last 20 years, more or less. No? And I can only say that I endorse their sentiments. I endorse, in particular, all of the names of the stalwarts who have stood by and worked with the party and kept it going in the face of the challenge that we face. Of course, some names are not mentioned, but I think of the unknown soldiers, those whose names we cannot recognize, those people who were there at every political meeting, who would walk miles to get to our political meetings and to our activities, who have never given up the party and stood their ground. That 40% of the population that has worked with us. I want to say also that I do recognize the impact that the challenges of 2012 and 2013 had on the party, but that in spite of that, we were able to achieve good things for the party. I believe that during my time in particular, the fact that we were able to rebrand the party and to introduce as its new mantra that we must put people first in everything that we do. Not that we were abandoning the idea of letting the voices of the people be heard, but putting the people first in every respect, as well as to develop a policy agenda that will take the country from 2017 to 2035, articulating in all areas of economic and social life what our plans were for the country, what our goals and objectives were, what the vision of the country were, refining its mission and its vision. All of these things that I think were very important. I just want to add quickly that I endorse the view expressed by both my colleagues that the future is bright for the party. We have a leader who is bright, who has a very clear and considered view of the kind of Grenada he wants to build. He's able to articulate that vision, has captured the imagination of the public at large, and in particular the young people and the not so young. And there are signs that the young people are working with the party to make good things happen. So I really believe that Grenada is on a good course. The task now facing the party, of course, is to expand its membership, to refine its constitution, to develop a code of conduct to which members will adhere, to develop a code of conduct for ministers in government, and to ensure that we build the constituency branches and polling division groups. So all in all, I endorse fully what my colleagues have said, and I feel quite happy and proud that the party is on the way to transforming Grenada for the benefit of all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, former Minister of Finance, Nazim Burke, for expressing and giving your reflections during your tenure as political leader. I know it was a challenging time for you in particular, and it is rather commendable as to how you handled and conducted yourself in office as then political leader. Thank you very much. And we have coming up next, we have Mr. Tillman Thomas, former Prime Minister of Grenada. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Heartbeat. Just please unmute your audio. We have coming up former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas. Welcome to Heartbeat, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Are you hearing me?
Yes, hearing you now loud and clear.
Okay, then. Well, thank you for being on this program. And, well, first, let me take the opportunity to congratulate the National Democratic Congress on celebrating 35 years.
Yes, indeed.
Because on several occasions, there are those who said that the National Democratic Congress was dead. But if there is one political organization in Grenada with a resurrection spirit, it is the National Democratic Congress.
Wow.
Because, as you know, Terry, my stint as leadership is a very long period, from 2000 to 2013.
Yes,
and I must
indeed
recognize all those who have contributed. I mean, after the defeat in 1999, after the defeat in 1999, the party was down and out, and we went out in the field, a few of us. I mean, there are some women I must mention, Maureen Emmanuel, the late Angela Cape, and others. We went out in the field to build and strengthen constituencies. And we articulated the whole issue of inclusion. I've been committed to inclusion, new persons coming to the party. And between 2000 and 2003, the party became a force. And in the 2003 election, as you know, we almost won the election, just as Dick Mitchell and others won the election in the last election, 2022. We fell short by one seat. Well, I'm just showing you that spirit of resurrection in the NDC. After a period of lull, the power is there, the drive is there to recover and to continue. And we must recognize and commend all of our supporters, for that, because they embrace the values and the principles on which the party stand, and that is very important. A great foundation is laid, And in recent times, we must recognize the contribution of Brother Ken Jones. I'm saying this because, the mainstream media, the way they've been dealing with the NDC over the years, because we are not in office, they have been sidelining us. And we must recognize that Brother Ken Jones has been defending and putting forward the NDC position very clearly and articulating our position. So we must recognize that contribution in more recent times. But overall, I would say we had some challenges. So as you know, we had challenges in the after the 2008 election, when we formed the government, we had some challenges. But at the same time, we did not let that really daunt us. We tried to maintain the brand, to stand up for what we believe in. The party took a certain decision to expel certain members, and that had affected the party. But at the same time, the party stood up for its principles, and the party must be, commended for this. We had our setbacks, but as I say, we were always able to rebound and to move forward. And again, I must commend the President Prime Minister and his team. They're doing an excellent job. I think they have a very good foundation. NDC has a very good foundation. The party stands for, the transparency and the accountability. We've been speaking about the management of the resources of the country and being honest and sincere with the people. Once they continue along that track and to be fair and honest in dealing with the people of the country, I think it's a very good future for the National Democratic Congress. But again, I must say that we had some challenges, and we overcome the challenges. It was a setback, politically speaking. But in the long run, it's clear that if we didn't take that stand that we took in that period, the NDC of today may not have been. But we took a stand to preserve the brand and the image and what we stand for. And because of this, the new leaders today could take this and take the country forward.
Great. Well, thank you so very much indeed, former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, who had served the National Democratic Congress for several years as its political leader. And I want to thank you sincerely for your reflections in celebration and recognition of the party's 35th year as a political entity. We will close at this time, but I am advised that the present political leader wishes to express his pleasure on the fact that he is standing tall on the shoulders of so many other individuals, former political leaders and individuals within the party, and he would like to have a special time, hopefully next week, where he can expound on the experiences and reflect on his, albeit short time as political leader, but he will be with you next week. Also, too, former political leader Franca Bernardine. She was unable to join today, but we would expect her to join next week, Sunday. So tune in next Sunday to hear the present political leader express his thoughts on now being the political leader and Prime Minister of the NDC as the party continues to celebrate 35 years as a formidable political party in Grenada. Thank you for joining the Heartbeat today, and join us again next Sunday, where we would bring to you interesting programs to benefit all supporters and all Grenadians through the length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Thank you, and see you next week. Goodbye.